to another episode of the Young Professionals Podcast. Luke and Sarge here, as always. Sarge, who are we speaking with?
Today, very excited to be speaking with Tyson Woodland. Tyson is a business development manager at Eventbrite, specialising in music partnerships. Tyson graduated from Swinburne University with a Bachelor of Business, co-majoring in International Business and Marketing. No longer than 24 hours after Tyson finished his last exam at Swinburne, he was on a plane to move to London to learn about what living outside of Australia is like. While in London, Tyson worked in an operational contracting role at Twickenham Stadium during the 2015 Rugby World Cup and then pivoted into a sales role where he was responsible for finding travellers to fill roles for au pair, volunteering, teaching English abroad programs. After realising Melbourne is the world's most livable city, Tyson returned back to Melbourne where he joined Uber Eats to help scale their expansion process throughout Metro Melbourne. Upon the recommendation of a few friends and colleagues, Tyson began the process of starting with Eventbrite, working cross-vertically initially with event creators, then moving into the music sector specifically. Tyson, welcome to the show.
Thanks, guys. Thanks very much for having me.
Thanks for coming on. And I think it's really exciting to talk to someone from the music industry today because that's something that Luke and I really, really missed during this time.
Yeah, I mean, we're all kind of in that frame of mind at the moment, and especially seeing, festivals go ahead in Northern Territory and, big events go out over in WA and New Zealand just kind of humming along. It's a bizarre kind of time sitting in a room for 200 days straight on lockdown.
Hopefully we can get there soon. Where we like to start the show is getting an understanding of what you do in your role day to day. So you're a business development manager and you particularly look after music partnerships. Do you work at Eventbrite? Do you want to give us an overview of what Eventbrite is first and foremost, and then maybe dive into what you're doing as a BD manager in the music partnership space?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the elevator pitch is probably the best way to start. Eventbrite is a very much a cross-geo event management platform, event ticketing platform that specialises cross-vertically. So that'll probably come up a few times today. So that really means anything from a 20-person, sit and paint class all the way through to a 100,000 person, retail industry conference in Las Vegas. So we really specialise in, work with creators across, 130 countries that we've ticketed in, and but obviously music is a really big focus of where we are as a platform. We are a self-service platform, which makes life really easy because we have, channels for people to be able to jump on and be able to sell tickets when needed without even reaching out to someone, which is really good. My day-to-day processes are pretty mixed, actually. From the end of March upwards to, I suppose, that June, July period, it was really focusing about kind of weathering the storm that is, COVID. But I'm happy to speak prior to the COVID era. Really working with music creators is, my day-to-day business, and that can be anything from talking about what's coming up within their events calendar to talking through, big on sales, as well as understanding, what kind of marketing channels and marketing distribution channels are the best fit for these kind of creators. It isn't just a simple conversation channel like, hey, we're going to get your tickets up and selling. It really does take into account everything from field operations discussions all the way through to, how to really reach into new markets and new segments. But every creator is different. I think that's the beauty of working within the music industry. Everyone's got, whether it be a niche genre all the way through to a niche kind of party. Not so much party, but probably get what I mean there.
Absolutely.
That's my day-to-day, but, definitely working within a SaaS platform, we tend to, and again, this word gets thrown around a lot.
Can we just unpackage what SaaS is in case our listeners at home don't actually know what SaaS stands for?
I won't define it because I always get it wrong, but yeah. Essentially a SaaS platform is having the ability to be able to work the technology yourself, to put it really dumbly. And so having the ability to actually jump on and, as I was saying before, go through the process of using the technology without actually having too many touch points on with the company itself.
And just with that, if anyone's looking for what SaaS is, it's capital S, double lowercase a, Capital S, so software as a service. Yeah.
Yes. And the definition, I was about to go down two strains there, but I always get it wrong. But yeah, so that's kind of where the SaaS platform aspects are.
So when you're engaging or when you're engaging creatives, who are you dealing with? Is it that manager, the creative itself?
Yeah, it's a good question. It really varies, and I could really speak cross-vertically here, but I will focus on the music side of things. Dealing with promoters and bookers all the way through to even venue owners, festival organisers. Obviously, that's something that's not a major facet of business at the moment. Festivals is quite tough within the market to be going ahead, but those are the kind of DMs, as we call them, or direct persons that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. Now, that doesn't mean that big brands don't have big events teams. So a lot of the big brands that you might see that, distribute in the retail space as well tend to jump into the music vertical here and there for specialized events that they do with like joint ventures. So there tends to be, quite a few different parties that we deal with for larger events. And then when it's coming down to the smaller events, you're usually, working with one or two people on a day-to-day basis.
Tyson, do you want to talk to how important the ticketing, aspect of an event is? Because I certainly didn't understand it until I was on a committee at uni, and we're tasked with doing the first week drinks or whatever, and you realize, oh, we're selling tickets for $10 to this thing, and I've got no idea how to actually organize this. Do you want to talk to how big of a part of an event, say like a festival or whatever it is, the ticketing aspect is?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it's something that I don't have asked as much as possible within the industry, because there's quite a few different creators, and how they view ticketing is obviously, each to their own. But how we really view ticketing is, that real first point of call of how you actually set the experience up. Now, going behind the science and the data of ticketing, it's, the less clicks that you have for someone to be able to actually purchase a ticket, the more likely they're going to be able to become a ticket purchaser. Now, that's the science and data aspect, but then you go back to actually like big on sales for big events. So essentially you want that part of, the process to be the biggest focused, because for a lot of these larger music events, well, whether it be a festival all the way through to, a big day party, that first, 1 to 2 hours worth of on sale, that's crucial. Like if you can get those ones that you piped up over a 3 to 6 month part to, become that ticket purchaser and then share on from there, that's essential. But
so when you're saying on purchaser, that's someone that makes a purchase and goes and tells all the mates and then they all buy a ticket. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So then comes into the distribution fold there. So
sounds a little bit like coronavirus.
Don't know if I'm going to link up coronavirus in the industry right now. We've taken a bit of a battering, but yeah, I think going back to the science of ticketing as well, there is truly a science behind the data. As I was saying there, less clicks, but also having and actually being able to find events is something that's crucial. Whether it be through websites, SEO abilities, so being able to actually search and find these events on the fly and having those organic conversions come through those channels, as well as distribution partners. So for example, we integrate with the likes of Facebook, Spotify, YouTube, and having people actually experience their songs or listen or watch their videos of these songs, and then having the ability to purchase for an up-and-coming event is crucial. And it's something that, we see quite a bit of conversion and quite a bit of traction come through these channels.
Mate, what role does social media play in the importance of that? And the reason I ask that is because at the start of the year, and this is coincidental to this conversation, but Sarge and I both listened to How I Built This podcast a fair bit, and they had Julia Hartz on, who I'm not too sure if she still is the CEO or certainly was the founder of Eventbrite. And she spoke about how Eventbrite started before social media came about, but as soon as that started, then it kind of just spread like wildfire, and people were able to spread events and share them and all that with their friends a lot easier. I would assume that's where the data side comes in.
For sure. Yeah. Your golden bullets there are social media, like Facebook in itself, like the events landscape within Facebook is just, and I'll kind of give you a bit of insight into just in a normal day. Like I would jump onto Facebook in the morning and actually go through the events tab to actually look through what's coming up, like what's on next weekend, what's on this weekend, what's in the following months, just to understand as well. So yeah, look, social media from a marketing standpoint as well, whether it be, the ad aspects all the way through to understanding where people are actually traveling through on these platforms, that's key to know. And, being able to actually collate that data through our platform and actually provide conversion success and tracking is crucial for everyone that touches, goes into the conversion side of their understanding. So, yeah, it's massive. I could go on for another 2 to 3 hours, but I won't dribble, as we say.
As a BD manager, so you loosely fall under kind of the sales umbrella, I would imagine. Did you have to upskill in being able to digest data and understand data and tell a story with data? And if you do, can you step us through what that learning curve was like?
Yeah, going from a selling travel packages to, being with a company that's got a meta database of selling in 130 countries to understanding, different demographics to different markets. Like, I'm still unaware of, certain points of data within our platform and external. And it's something that you really learn on a day-to-day basis. But one of the biggest, things, and this probably aligns to our culture, is being able to actually ask, putting those questions out to those people within different teams. Even May last year, I was able to get over to San Francisco to our HQ and actually sit with different engineering teams and bodies to be able to understand like these kind of points that I just had no idea about, and something to learn on and educate. But you educate yourself daily, especially more so people within our regional team as well.
On the data and sales aspect, a lot of people associate sales with just going out and talking to people and getting on the phone. Can you talk to how using data to drive sales, or how you use data to help in your role particularly?
Yeah, conversion analysis is really, the kind of data points that we really want to sell. Like having these integrations and all these kind of cool kind of gizmos with all these different companies, it looks good. It's a good PR lens, but being able to back that up with actual raw data for, a promoter, a booker, or whatever it may be that works with different companies, like being able to actually put that forward and say, well, this is actually what's going to happen. And this is what's going to happen with your events and how we're actually going to fit into your events model, instead of them having to worry about how they actually fit into our business model. So yeah, it's a bit of a different sell, but it's something that, you come up against blockers. People know their punters more than we will ever know it. But when it comes to the raw data and raw science behind it, like that's something that we really want to help them better understand. And that probably, it probably links up there with control of data. Having the control of data and actually where you place that data as well, and then use that data for obviously further events is something that's, it's crucial.
And just on that theme, like you're also working in a sales type capacity at Uber when you came back to Melbourne. Have you seen over that short period of time how prevalent data, like has data become much more prevalent in that 4 or 5 years that you've been going at it?
Yeah, I think data access is something that's been, prior to, let's say, 10 years ago, data was a thing that was kind of like, it's there, but people didn't really know how to use it as much within these, kind of sales roles that I've been experiencing. But yeah, it's accelerating on a day-to-day basis, and seeing all these different platforms actually generate new understandings of data is something that you can take a seat back and look through all the, different tech subscriptions that you have and these emails coming through to better understand all these little startups and how they actually use and control data. So it's really interesting to see that, and, working with some creators that are very, very data heavy and very data reliant when it comes to their on sales. Those are the ones that really have a true understanding of what's actually going to happen compared to I'm going to sell 20,000 tickets with a flick of the hat and with a flick of the switch. So yeah, it's a good question.
Mate, really interested to get your perspective on what it's like working in the tech industry from a non-technical person's background. And by that, I mean, like you're not a software engineer or a data engineer or anything like that, but
never been.
Yeah. But I think what we're trying to, I guess, show is that sales or roles that don't necessarily require a technical background, every business basically has this function. And if you want to get into the tech industry or whatever it is, that's certainly a path that you can take. So do you want to talk about how you got into tech and what working in sales is like and kind of what you get exposed to through that?
Yeah, I mean, starting off, I thought I was quite, well, luck doesn't really come down to it, but having some, previous school alumni and some mates that had, been with Uber Eats previously, like starting on a contractual basis there and a contractor role within Uber Eats was something that, I was able to get going pretty well just off the back of some words from, some friends and even previous colleagues. So that starting piece there with Uber Eats was quite interesting coming into a tech culture, especially a culture that is, based around food, for example. So you'd be eating every hour on the hour. But when it came to, working with some, really quite intellectual teams on not just those data aspects, but the sales aspects, how to actually sell, these platforms moving forward, that was a real change of pace compared to where I'd been previously. The tech culture and the tech, well, I would say stratosphere, whether it be in SF or all the way through to like a new tech culture within like a Colorado, all the way down to, just being within these companies, it's attractive. Like being able to work with like-minded people, having an autonomy to be able to succeed in your role, and having the leaders to be able to push you in those roles. That's something that tech's all about. Being able to dress comfortably, work when needed, but also have things like mental capacity breaks, all the way through to, moving on into the Eventbrite scheme, just having a really, really good cultural fit. So everyone within our team leans on each other for support. Now that might be business minded, it might be even socially minded as well. So, you talk about the kind of Friday bevs, but, we talk about the being able to help out, within different parts of the events industry when we can, as well as getting along to events together. So yeah, I mean, the tech industry it's a great one to be in, and the autonomy is probably the highlight there of what I was talking about. It's, being able to really own your own business.
You've spoken about culture there. What do you think drives that culture, particularly in the tech industry?
Oh, I think openness. Like, there's no real closed doors, and that's something that, being within, Eventbrite I really hail on is there's no closed doors. We're all able to communicate in two-way channels. There's no one-way channels, and that's something that, we really pride ourselves on. But then again, being able to take a 15-minute break to play some table tennis, or being able to, watch a bit of NBA whilst, having that on whilst working in the background, like these are little things that make you get up in the morning and say, well, one, I love my job, and two, I just can't wait to get into the office. Now, don't get me wrong, my two-bedder here in Richmond's, it's okay, but, we're missing the office right now, that's for sure, and the people. So, but yeah, culture you could go on for another few hours, but it's something that, we really pride ourselves on and really progress with.
No, I can certainly resonate with that. And I spent a few years at Seek before getting into law, and everything that you just said was kind of there as well. And tech seems to, and it's such a wide, I wouldn't even really define it as an industry, really. It's just, a discipline or a kind of company, but it just seems to create cultures where, like you said, it's, work when you need to, or everyone kind of trusts each other to get the work done. And because it's such a, like the company needs, say, the engineers, and it needs the salespeople, and it needs a customer service, and needs a strategy. Like there's so many different people there. You can really learn from all of them. So I think it's a fantastic kind of area to be working in.
Sure.
Mate, let's bounce back to when you were coming, say, through school and figuring out kind of who you were and what you're interested in. Do you want to walk us through what you were thinking, say, around the kind of year 10, year 11, year 12 stage? And did you ever think that you'd be working for Eventbrite, or I'm not even sure. Did Eventbrite
probably didn't exist back then?
Yeah, look, I mean...
that's to say Eventbrite is young, not that you are old.
No, I get you. I looked at year 10, year 11 stages of my life. I was very open to opportunities. I think there's one real similarity within my family personally, is that kind of just gone about our processes because of kind of how our, parents have really, pushed us to doing different things. For example, my old man's an accountant / financial advisor, runs a little niche firm. My middle brother is a recruiter down at Geelong Football Club. And my older brother used to work in HR, and now he works as a teacher. So it's quite a different breadth of, where I was kind of looking at professionally in the ages of year 10, year 11. I knew I always wanted to be in a role that would have progression. That's something that I knew when I was, a younger kind of guy, that I really wanted to have a role where there would always be that next step. Now, don't get me wrong, year 11 and year 12, I was thinking of real estate at one point because I just chatted so much garbage. And then I was thinking about, all these different, becoming a lawyer at some point because I watched too many movies that had law about it. And then I think coming into year 12, I really had, my middle brother down in Geelong. I remember him actually saying this, is like, mate, it doesn't really matter. You go in VCA, obviously do your best. And then from there, just take the steps that you need to do to be able to, get into an industry that, one, you enjoy, and two, waking up that it's, it's going to be a good day. Now that's a very, very lofty, open comment, but I really stuck those words true going through university. I knew that commerce was something that could lead me, or Bachelor of Business is something that could lead me to, somewhere within the professional realms of where I'm at now. But yeah, that probably led on to me wanting to travel as well.
You say that's a lofty comment, and it is in one sense, but it's not in another. In another, because I think your story really, really talks to that, in that you booked your ticket to fly overseas to the UK before you finished uni, and you went over there, and you weren't just going over there to stuff around. I think you went there with a bit of a purpose to try and work things out. Do you want to talk to what you were doing over there and how valuable that was for you in terms of your journey today?
Firstly, the arrogance of me actually booking a ticket the day after my last exam while sitting on around, I think it was 38, 39. So I needed another, 20 odd marks in a 3-hour exam, and I was out of there with 1 hour done. Just supreme arrogance at a young age. But anyway, I'll move on from that. Look, I think that, I went over and did a bit of traveling initially, as, most young gents do, and then, and ladies as well. But I knew coming back into the UK, I actually really wanted to explore parts of the UK and also get a bit of downtime. Living in metropolis Melbourne and being lucky enough to have everything kind of at your hands here, whether it be culturally, socially, whatever it may be, I kind of put myself open to opportunities anywhere across the UK, not just London. So from there, I had someone reach out that he ran a pub up just north of Leeds. It was about half an hour north of Leeds in a little town called Pullen Wharfdale. Had a populace of about 210 people. Old brick kind of little village that you'd see on some sort of Bridget Jones movie or something. And he basically said, "Come on up. We've got some accommodation on top. I just need you to run the bar," which I'd had experience previously doing, but running a bar in Melbourne is completely different to a 110-year-old pub in the north of England that had, real beer gas pumps and things like that. But anyway, I had the ability there to work there on a month-to-month scale and have 2 weeks off in between those months. And having that time up there, I was able to really, work when I can, save up money, and then be able to, research as to what kind of roles I'd really want to get into post this period of kind of chillaxing and getting away from the world, so to speak. But it also gave me the opportunity to travel around, parts of the UK that I'd always wanted to do when I was a young fella.
So there's a bit of a delay. So why don't you step us through the next, I guess, couple of steps in the career? And we've said a couple of times, I spent a bit of time overseas, and so has Sarge, and we certainly learnt a lot of those lessons that you were talking about there, and we can apply them, or are applying them in our career. But how did you apply that to your next couple of steps and kind of when you came back home, what did that look like?
Yeah, I think just having an understanding of what was really coming about within the business world and where a lot of, young people were entering into the workforce. So, seeing some old schoolmates being able to jump into a pretty cool company that you'd read up a lot about. But then, having that kind of next step of getting into London was pretty crucial for me. So working for a very much an operational contracting team to then contract at Twickenham for I think it was around a 2 to 3 month period. And actually being able to see how people interacted within, office spaces to external of offices and, just being around people that were, in workplace or I suppose the workforce for up to 5 to 10 to 30 years for some of these people. But being able to actually earn a little bit of money whilst working, at a major rugby stadium. I grew up playing rugby. I still love rugby. I'll be watching it tomorrow, the game. But that was a really interesting part of my life. And I think from there that, even though it was on a contractual role, I needed to really find work after that 3 month period. And that kind of led me on to, working within the travel industry. And then all while I was doing this, really keeping up to date with what was happening back home as well, technologies that were launching and what kind of trends you were seeing within not just the tech space, but also just the current living space within Melbourne.
On that, what sorts of things were you looking at while you're overseas to stay on top of trends and understanding particularly what was happening in the tech space?
Yeah, I look subscribing to as many possible tech platforms and tech newsletters, as well as, having an understanding of different things that were happening in the Silicon Valley, like having these subscriptions kind of bottled up into this, meta database again, as I'll say, of just all these readings to understand, what was happening within new business and just kind of seeing, what was happening, not just in Australia as well, but across other countries globally. It's at the end of the day, it was a lot of study and a lot of education, but I think the SaaS platform kind of industry and the tech industry really stood out because you'd see all these really cool articles about what people were doing and the technologies they were creating. And I think that was just having a bit of time to read was something that I really look back on now and say, well, I did my time well there.
I think it served you well. Was there anything like in particular that piqued your interest in the tech space or the SaaS space? Like how did you? Because you've spoken about data a lot, and it sounds like you're pretty across using data to help drive decision making. Was there anything there that piqued your interest in that as well?
Yeah. Look, the data side of it is probably not ahead of the culture side of it. The culture side of it is definitely a standout. Seeing people being able to go into work and really enjoy what they were doing on a day-to-day basis is something that was like, well, if I'm able to do a role and be able to provide to this company and be able to exceed in what I'm doing whilst enjoying my role, like what else do you need in your life? And that's something that I always said to myself, if I was to get into this tech space and if I was to get into this SaaS platform space, how am I going to be able to exceed? Like what kind of role sits well with me? And sales, business development now, obviously with Eventbrite, that comes pretty naturally to me. I like to talk a lot. I like to become as personable with the next person that I meet because you never know what that person's actually going to do for you as well in the future, not just a business sense. A lot of my clients now I keep very close tabs on even close to a social sense now. So that's, that the culture side of it's obviously probably the biggest influence there. But I think the data side really came out of actually getting into the weeds and really digging deep into other people's roles and what they actually do and how they use data. So that came a little later. I don't think that was prior to. I think the culture side was very much before that.
Mate, we haven't really dived into this topic much on the podcast, and it can seem a little bit taboo, but not to talk dollar figures with you particularly, but like for a sales role, particularly in tech, like it's no secret that you get remunerated quite well as a junior person compared to other industries. So say you do a I don't know, a commerce degree and go into a big four firm, you're going to get paid a lot more in a sales role at a tech industry because you're selling a product that essentially makes that company heaps of money. And I don't think it's something that's spoken about a lot. And by no means should money be a driver for a junior person. But if you're weighing up stuff and you're not really sure what you want to do, and you may be wanting to learn a bit more about a particular industry or become in an environment that surrounds yourself with really smart people and et cetera, sourcing out one of these roles is not really a bad idea. Like, you get paid pretty well. And as you say, you get a fantastic culture. And two, if you're kind of interested in tech or if you're interested in anything, like, you might be sitting in the room opposite a bunch of engineers that you can go and talk to and say, hey, what do you do in your role? Like, what are you actually building? That kind of stuff. So I think it's a fantastic opportunity that isn't really spoken about that much.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of a taboo with sales in general. That's, and I'm not speaking from internal, thoughts and comments. I'm speaking within the industry. Like, you'll see articles on sales reps mis-selling and things like that. And that's not within the industry I'm talking about specifically, but sales in itself has a taboo to it, but also sales has a really, really hardcore driven aspect to it as well. Now, I'm going back to my early days within the travel industry. Like, if you weren't clicking out 250 dials and getting onto, 20 people a day, you're not succeeding. So, and don't get me wrong, that's very different to what I do on a day-to-day basis now, working within business development. But doing those hard yards early on will lead you into, one, having a solid CV, two, having some really good references to be able to actually look at moving into one of these roles. And again, people see business development, Eventbrite, and they go, wow, that sounds like a lot of fun, doesn't it? Hey, like these, a lot of the team that I work with in BD, they're hard hitting. Like, they make the most of, every second of the day to be able to, one, find new business, but also two, be able to partner with businesses that, we can equip quite well for. So, yeah, I mean, you're right in the remuneration stage. That comes a little bit after those early days. But it is something that, you really have to get your hands dirty with, starting off in not just sales, but into business development as well. So, yeah, it's a good call out.
On the topic of talking about like selling or sales, like, what are some key skills that you think are necessary for someone to really excel in that space?
Yeah. Again, probably going back a little bit into my career, I think working within the travel industry, that's such a fickle industry. I mean, right now it's copying, the biggest hurts that it's had in a long period of time. But I was lucky enough to have some really good managers when I was quite young. One of them still in Australia, a Canadian gentleman called Jay Maynard. He really just gave me the brunt of being personable on the phone. Like, if you're able to be personable on the phone as well as you are in person, like, that trust comes in, and then the trust follows on from there with that person into the technology or the platform or the product that you're actually selling. So, yeah, sales and skills. I mean, you can read up on every Wolf of Wall Street article that you want. That's not going to get you to a point where you understand who you're talking to and what they're actually wanting. But I think a real skill that you see with not just sales reps, but people within business development is walking away from, a possible partnership. That's probably the hardest thing to do in sales because you're remunerated on that possible sale. But having the ability to say, yeah, we're not a good fit here. We're probably not what you're looking for. That's the hardest thing to do. And if you're able to actually ascertain that skill, like, you're going to go far. I've always said that, and you can really tell that within someone's personality.
Sorry, but by the sounds of that, it would seem that it's like you're making a decision for the good of that business as well, right? And it's like, you don't necessarily fit in here. I'm going to make that call early because my time can be better spent elsewhere, and so can your time.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that kind of goes, down to Eventbrite as a company. Like, we really look at how we actually fit into an events model of a team. It shouldn't never, ever be about how they're going to fit into our model. So that's something that we really, really, and I know I've reiterated that now, but it's something that we really, really rely on within, bringing on the right creator at that point of time. Now, going back to, again, I'll skip back to those travel days. Like, travel's for everyone. Like you can get along, but then it comes into, being able to sell teaching English programs. You have to have a really good educational backing. You have to be able to do a TEFL course, all the way through to, partnering with au pairs. Like they have to have, police checks, security checks, working with children checks. They have to have a really good referrals. So again, like it went all the way back there. And that's something that you learn more and more. But again, I think that, the biggest thing that I always, pass on to anyone within sales or business development is making mistakes early on. The more you can make mistakes early on, the more you're going to learn progressing within your role.
That's probably a nice little prelude into a question we like to ask. What's any like super big mistakes or failures you've made, and how have you learned from those?
Yeah, look, I probably aligning emotional connections with your role, especially within sales. You really, and business development as well, you shouldn't really align emotional connections to, what you're actually selling. I mean, obviously you do have that connection there in one way, shape or form, but having someone actually say no to, your platform or technology is kind of like, well, hold on a second, we've just figured out like a pathway forward for us to partner, and now you're saying no. Like having that understanding when I was young, I didn't understand. Like I couldn't take it in. I'm a pretty hard on the sleeve kind of guy. But as you educate yourself on more and more of who you're dealing with, the less attached you become. But yeah, it's a good call out.
When you were younger, how were you taking that? Were you like, oh, like, damn, like these guys really don't like me? Like, would you really take it to heart?
Yeah, absolutely. Like,
yeah.
I'm an Aussie guy selling over in London. I was selling, travel packages to Australia. Who doesn't want to go to Australia? But
we did say Melbourne's the world's most livable city at the start.
Exactly. Like lovely beaches. No, I when you're younger, you probably throw a few tantrums here and there. I remember throwing my pen a few times here and there, but I think as you mature and as you grow into roles, you tend to kind of just go, oh, so be it. Like, that's just business at the end of the day. Having that thought process of that's just business, if something doesn't go your way, is the best mentality that I've ever put in place. But then also the step after that, and something that, I've educated people on before, is really understanding, what gap you've missed there. And where you've actually missed on an opportunity, whether it be commercially minded, technology minded, or having an understanding of, maybe something that you've said throughout the process that has really led to, the demise of that conversation.
With that, mate, I think when in these conversations, we try to talk about the particular industry and the particular role, but then the lessons that people come out with, like what you just said, is super valuable. But I think it's important that people can understand that you can also apply that to a personal situation. So say a business deal doesn't go ahead or whatever, and they choose not to go with Eventbrite, for example, you can apply that same thinking to if you apply for a job, if you apply for an internship. It's not necessarily they don't like you. It's just that your skill set or what they need isn't compatible at that particular point in time.
For sure.
But I think the most important part you said there is like you need to take the time to reflect on why that didn't work. Like what didn't you say? What didn't you show? What skill set didn't you have that you can go and improve on and then bring it back next time?
Yeah, absolutely. And I interviewed for another role with a marketing team over in London. Had a really lovely office. It was over in Shoreditch, and I put on a nice suit, got in there, had a really, really good conversation, went through kind of everything that I'd done previously and how I could help out, and et cetera, et cetera. And it was down to me and one other gentleman, and this is prior to me being in that role within the travel industry. And I got a call from them, and they said, hey, yeah, look, you missed out this time. It was really tough. And I kind of initially I was like, why? And then before I could even really go about asking that process, the recruiter for this company, I won't name the company, there's no real need. The recruiter of that company actually went about giving me some feedback, and not just like feedback like, oh, you're just not a good fit, which is bollocks. Like at the end of the day, most people are a fit unless there's something crucially wrong, and that's how I feel. But really kind of jutting down on certain areas that I needed to upskill. and really have a better understanding of going into these conversations as well, and these recruitment conversations. And that to me was crucial moving forward for any role that I interviewed for. And I always thought of those things that that particular person had said moving forward.
Is that something that you hold close now at work, that you'll constantly ask for feedback to make sure that you're always developing and improving and making sure you can be, one, as valuable as you can for your own purposes, but two, as valuable as you can for Eventbrite?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, most tech companies these days are doing quarterly reviews, even, every week on week, should I say, that we take a step back to understand what's going on and also ask for advice and ask for guidelines and really set in place, a strategy to be able to act on things that we might not be right there at. So absolutely. I love quarterly reviews because I tend to ask some hard-hitting questions as to how I can really improve, how I can upskill, how I can become better and have a better understanding of, what I'm selling at in the environment. I keep track of those quarterly reviews. Even now, from starting back in 2018, I'll go back and have a look over those to see where I've progressed from.
I think a really important part on that, just before we ask you for some advice and then wrap up, but with the feedback thing, I think it's really important that it be purpose driven, and you show through kind of consistently acting in the right way that whoever you're asking feedback from, they know that you're actually wanting the feedback and you're going to implement a change to get better at it. Because there's no point in saying, oh, hey, someone said that I need to ask for feedback. You don't ask for feedback and you never do anything about it, because then that shows the person that you've asked for, well, that's a waste of time. I'm not going to spend my brain power thinking about how you can get better.
For sure.
So I think it's almost like you need to drop the ego a little bit. And I've certainly had to work on this, and everyone does, I think, when you get into whatever space you're getting into. But it's a very much, hey, these people that I'm working with or engaging with or whatever, they really actually want me to get better. So if I go and say, hey, how can I work on this? And they give me an honest answer, and it might sting a little bit, but they've done it for a reason. And if you can go away and implement it, you'll be a better operator for sure.
And a lot of the times they've had those conversations as well, going through their professional progression as well. And that's one thing that a lot of leaders that I've worked with always note to me. It's like, hey, I've been in your position before. I've asked those questions before, and that kind of comfort, and that's something that I love to see from leadership, and something that I get on a week-to-week occurrence.
On the topic of advice, Tyson, what advice would you have to someone who is looking to get into the music industry, particularly given what's happening at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough question. It's a really good question. I think having communication with as many people, as many platforms, and as many technologies that are used on a day-to-day basis is something that I would always continue to encourage young people. I get people that come up to me at a gate of a big festival or a small event, and they'll be like, oh, you must love your job. It must be so good. It's not all roses. Like, there's a lot of hard yakka to it, but I love that passion. And what I'd always say to, a lot of these young entrepreneurs and young people wanting to get within this industry is, one, where do you want to go? Like, what do you want to do? Like, is it artist management? Is it ticketing? Like, is it, understanding, like, or being a part of a data platform, or is it like pre-registration, or what kind of area do you want to get onto? And then two, actually giving them some, really good guidelines on kind of what to research, what to follow up on. And then the third piece to it is really getting your hands dirty. So, reaching out to those people, those leaders that are within that specific area that they're wanting to get into, because reaching out doesn't hurt. It never will hurt.
On that, mate, can you dive into what that reaching out actually looks like? Because I think a lot of people say reach out, and because you're sitting on the more senior side, you know what that means. But for someone in, say, high school or university, what does reaching out to a senior person in the music industry actually look like?
Look, I'm becoming more connected with LinkedIn these days than what I was previously. However, getting my number and having someone text me, I don't find that unprofessional in any sense, but having an understanding of how to verbalize within that first point of contact. Now, text probably wouldn't be preferable, but I personally wouldn't mind if someone actually texted me. One, means they're quite personable itself, but two, having your verbiage to be like, look, I'm not reaching out for a job or anything. I just want to touch base just to get a bit of insight into what the industry is like and who you work with and how you go about your day to day, and then just ask you a few questions on, what I'm hoping to get to and how I go about getting there. So that kind of connection can come through the likes of LinkedIn all the way through to even getting an email somewhere online, or even, as I said there, probably a little bit more unprofessional, but within the industry, a text isn't too harmful. Probably a bit different to the big four in whatever category.
I think just on that though, like it goes one of two ways. Like, yeah, okay, people can say, oh, you kind of stalked me and found my number, whatever. That's a bit weird. But at the same time, it's like, oh, well, you really keen. Because sometimes it's not the easiest thing to find. So if you find it, you maybe think of it like a bit of a treasure hunt. And like you said, just make sure that message that you do send is personable, has the right tone, and go from there.
Absolutely. I mean, and then again, the person on the other end of the line, you don't really know what their characteristics are going to be like. It could be a brick wall, or it could be one of the more, it could be one of the better opportunities that you miss out on if you don't. And, the whole Jordan 100% of the shots you don't take, blah, blah, blah. That's something that I really relate to as well. And, always take your shot, because you never know what's going to happen at the end of it. And it's funny that we talk about this, because I did have someone not too recently that was laid off because of COVID that reached out and basically just gave him some processes moving forward of how he should enter the market.
I will add on that, and I'm stealing this from Sarge, and it's something he said a couple of years ago that kind of really stuck with me. It's like, if you're reaching out to people to try and get into whatever industry or ask for advice or whatever it is, and you might be talking to 10 people or something, you better be game ready when they respond, because they might pick up the phone and be like, okay, talk to me. Like, what do you want to ask? And if you're not ready for that, then you look like a bit of an idiot. So you need to have your questions ready and actually have done the thinking ahead of, it's all well and good to go and find someone's mobile number and shoot them a text, but do the thinking beforehand.
Exactly. And if they are to call you back 3 seconds after, have that rebuttal ready. Like, they're going to ask you some pretty quick whip questions. Anyone that reaches out to me, I'll be like, hey, have you ever created like a draft event on Eventbrite? Hey, have you been to an event? What's your favorite event? Like, these are the kind of questions that I'll whip back. And if I'm not getting some pretty spot on answers, it's kind of like, well, have you actually thought about what industry you're hoping to get into? And maybe this might not be the route that you're trying to get into, but you're trying to get somewhere else. So it's a really good call.
When you reach out to one of these guys and they come back to you with a question that you don't know the answer to, then you're better off saying, look, I actually haven't thought about that. There's no point in bullshitting them, because then you just lie, and the more you lie, the harder it gets. And you only get one shot, generally speaking, at talking to someone that you've reached out to. So you want to leave as good an impression as you can.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even interviewing for someone within a role internally, like, if someone isn't able to answer a question in the best possible fashion, but they're to come back, in a professional sense and say, look, that's something that I'd like to upskill in. That's something that I'd like to work on. There's something to know more about, and I feel like I'd be the right fit for that role, or whatever it may be. That kind of stuff really shines. Like, it really does. So yeah, it's a good call.
Mate, last one to wrap up on. If you're talking to a year 12 student or a university student that wants to get into the field, I think we kind of touched on a few different things, but what would be one thing that you would say, focus on this or get better at this?
Yeah, I'll say a couple of things, just because there are a couple of things that you can follow up on here. But, going to events, having a look around when you get there. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of events that you might have had a few jars before you got in, but really have an understanding of, how gate operations go and how technology works as you go through things like gates, and even at the event, from staging all the way through to lighting, audio, things like that. Have a look around. You're having a lot of fun doing that, but it is what it is. With kind of SaaS platforms, having an understanding of the technology, whether it be getting your hands dirty even prior to reaching out to a company or applying for a role, creating like a draft event with us is something that you can do 10 to 15 minutes and even have it live, but probably something I wouldn't encourage. But again, going back to the communication side, don't be afraid to reach out. Most people within the music vertical and in the music industry are really happy to take a call and chat shop, because really that's all we do on a day-to-day basis. But there's mostly friendly characters out there, which is good. But yeah, those are a couple of points that, and don't be discouraged as well. Like, you'll hit a couple of little blockers here and there, but don't be discouraged by any of it. Like, keep persisting. If it's something that you want to do and it's something that you want to be a part of, keep at it.
We'll make sure to put your mobile number in the show notes, mate. Only joking. Only joking.
Look, I'm happy to have the email in there, but that's about it.
No, all good. Well, mate, I think you've given us a really good, recap of what the, tech industry and in that kind of large umbrella, what the music industry is like. And I think it's really cool to have you on, because a lot of people that are, have gone to events, I think it's a realistic thing to say, have probably come across Eventbrite. And it's cool to understand how the business operates and how you got there. So really appreciate the time.